Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia here, and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup, and the first of 2019, I'm pleased to say. So, today, we're going to look at the Florida Mayhem. They are the next on the list after the Dallas Fuel, and the Florida Mayhem might as well be a new team this season, because they are not what they were last season. They are part of what I'm going to name and call the Four. And the four would be San Francisco Shock, Dallas Fuel, Florida Mayhem, and the Shanghai Dragons. The four people that propped up the table. Because above that, things got a lot tighter last season. A lot tighter. So they finished second from bottom with only 7 wins on the board all season. Much better than the people below them. That was the Shanghai Dragons, quite obviously. But not quite on a par with Dallas and San Francisco, who both had strong ends to the season. Florida didn't have a strong end to the season. They didn't have a strong mid part to the season. They didn't have a strong start to the season. They didn't have anything strong. Let's be honest. Florida were kind of what I expected Shanghai to do, if you saw what I mean. But Shanghai were just so unbelievably poor. And this has triggered a big shake-up for the Florida Mayhem, especially in terms of their roster. Now, their organisation is now made up of some different things as well. They've got Mineralin as head coach, Artuda or Raider as assistant coach, Robert Kip as performance coach, Ye as an analyst, and Andrew as a streamer. They've jigged things around quite majorly. And then you get to their roster. Now, their roster from last season. Logix is now playing for the XL2 Academy in Contenders NA. JNATHYN is also playing in Contenders NA for the Academy team of Florida Mayhem. Swoosh has retired. Zebasai is now non-affiliated. And Zupe and Zapis are now playing for Team Giganti once more, because I believe they did play for Team Giganti before the Overwatch League's inaugural season. So that's a lot of people going out of Florida Mayhem in the off-season. The only 2 people remaining are Tavik and Sayaplayer. Sayaplayer was signed midway through the season last season, so I really didn't expect him to be going anywhere. Tavik, we'll get on to Tavik later on, because Tavik's a weird one. But they now have a pretty shaken up roster, shall we say. So, some of these names you will recognise. Whether that be from people that were in the Overwatch League last season, left and have now come back, or they were just transferred from another team. So, the first name we're going to look at is SNT. SNT is a tank player for the Florida Mayhem. Now, he signed... Hold on a minute. SNT. Oh, I'm getting mixed up. SNT is the new name for Awesome Guy. Awesome Guy did play for Florida last season. He is the South Korean tank, the main tank, Winston Arisa Reinhardt. That is me getting mixed up. I did not know he changed his name. So SNT is Awesome Guy. You must remember that, because that's going to be key going into the next season. So they still have their main tank in Awesome Guy or SNT. Then they have Zephyr. Zephyr, you might remember, was part of the Seoul Dynasty last season. He is an off-tank. He plays D.Va, Zarya, and Roadhog. He was good, but as we know with Seoul last season, nowhere near as good as we were expecting them to be. Seoul have decided to mix things up a bit. That's a spoiler for later on in the series. So they ended up getting rid of a few players, getting some new players in, and Zephyr was one of the casualties of the Seoul Dynasty. So, he is now playing for the Florida Mayhem. Also playing for the Florida Mayhem is Hagapum. Now, you might remember Hagapum from London Spitfire. Remember when London Spitfire had a full 12-man roster? When they were 2 teams merged together, GC Busan and Kongdu Panthera? Well, Hagapum came from the GC Busan lineup out of South Korea. He played for London Spitfire last season, but was let go midway through the season. Actually, it was near the end of the season, because basically London couldn't keep everyone happy. When you've got so many good players on a roster, you can't play them all at once, and London soon found that out and got rid of some of their players. Hagapun was one of the casualties. He then went down to the Florida Mayhem Academy team in NA Contenders and now has been promoted to their main team, as I kind of expected he would be when I heard he was playing for their academy. He did decently for their academy, although Mayhem's academy isn't really dominating in NA Contenders. When you're talking about NA Contenders, you're looking at Fusion University, XL2, and people like that. Not necessarily Mayhem, although Hagapun, as always, is a very decent player, and he was a very good Zenyatta for London Spitfire when he was playing in the Overwatch League last season. He can also play Sombra and Ana. So we know about Hagapun. Also, we still have Apply signed for the Florida Mayhem on the 24th of September, and was before that playing in Mayhem's academy. Again, another player promoted from Mayhem's academy. He'd been in Mayhem's academy for a while, going back to season 1 of Contenders. Obviously, they've looked at him, thought he's good enough to be promoted. He is a DPS player, well known for his Genji and his Pharah. So, that's another player promoted from their academy team, and again, we'll discuss this in general in a minute. Moving on, and we have Chris. Now, you won't have heard of Chris before. Chris is spelled with a K, by the way. He is a support for the Florida Mayhem this season, and they have signed him from JNATHYN in South Korea. So, he has done fairly decently in Korean Contenders, but JNATHYN have never really been massive in Contenders. They've had to go through the South Korean trials of Contenders. But something you have to remember about Contenders is the different regions have different skill levels, right? Now, I don't want to be down on some regions, so I'm going to be careful how I say this, but NA Contenders, I would say, is your normal level of Overwatch at pro scenes. EU is a tiny smidge below that, but the more that's going on in EU, the more it's becoming more of a par level. Korean Contenders is a step up. You have very good teams in Korean Contenders and a lot of players that could play in the Overwatch League. And some of them now are, as Chris is. They are very good. So some of the teams that are in the trials of Contenders in Korea could possibly be very normal EU or NA Contenders teams. It's just because of their region, they're just different. It's just different and it's more competitive. The same as you look at the Pacific Contenders and it's not quite as strong as NA in Europe. It's not a downer on those regions, it's just the player base is slightly different, and that's how it works out. Your best players are in Korea. You can argue with that at the moment. The Overwatch World Cup is proof of that. And the overwhelming amount of South Koreans in the Overwatch League is also proof of that. Something Florida Mayhem have clearly taken into account here. So, Chris is well known for his Lucio and his Zenyatta and his Mercy. He already has prize money on the board after being part of the Overwatch Apex back before the Overwatch League began, and then being part of Contenders. He's won quite a bit of prize money over his time. So, coming from JNATHYN, he's looking pretty good. He's looking like a decent signing. Very happy with that. Going alongside Hagapun, I could see that being a very good combo. So then, we have BQB. He is a DPS for the Florida Mayhem this season. He comes from X6 Gaming, again in Korea Contenders. You see where I'm going with this? He is well known for his Sombra. Great. The details I've got here, he's very, very, very concentrated on Sombra, which is interesting. He's obviously surely going to be able to play Tracer very well and things like that. This is why they didn't hold on to people like Logix, because Logix, I'm sorry, Logix would not get into this team. He just wouldn't. He'd be a bench player. So that's why he's no longer with the Mayhem. Another interesting signing. One big thing is he has won Korean Contenders, because X6 Gaming won Season 1 of Overwatch Contenders in Korea. That is a big accolade to have on your CV when you're an Overwatch pro player. If you've won contenders in Korea, that is a big, big accolade and a very good pickup for the Florida Mayhem. Last player we're going to look at, if I can ever say it, is Swan or Swoon. He is going to be a main tank for the Florida Mayhem this season. Interesting. Well known for his Reinhardt and his Winston, he also is from South Korea. Funny, huh? And he wasn't actually playing in South Korea this past year or so. He's been playing for NRG Esports in NA contenders. This is very interesting, and I like the way they're going with this. So, he has earnings on the board. He was very good for Kongdu Panthera and Team Kongdu back in Korea, and then when he switched to NRG, NRG are very good in NA contenders. I would say they're one of the top 6 teams around Season 1 and 2 of contenders. They're in those top 6 teams in the whole of the region for contenders. So, a very good pickup for the Florida Mayhem. And something else is key. Swoon should be able to communicate with the South Korean players on the roster of the Florida Mayhem. But also, he should be able to speak English because he's been playing for NRG all this time. So, there is a link up between the existing group of players, like Apply, who is going to be two-way with their academy team, and Tavik, who both speak English, and the rest of the roster, which all, by the way, is now South Korean. Now you see where I'm going with this, right? Florida Mayhem have 9 players, and 7 of them are South Korean now. They didn't have one South Korean player when they started last season. And this leads me on to the next thing. I don't see where Tavik fits in now. It's interesting they kept him at all. Tavik is a very versatile player, and I do agree with them keeping him. But I don't see him fitting in. With Saya Player, Apply, BQB, I don't see him playing over these guys. So it's interesting that they kept Tavik. I think Tavik will be used more as a utility player. But it's interesting. Very, very interesting. And I want to see how they work this team. This team is going to be... I get the feeling it's going to be boom or bust. Because there's no real synergy going on here, apart from the players that were already at the Florida Mayhem before. So you're talking about Side Player and Tavik. That's really no synergy there, because they're probably not going to be playing at the same time anyway. So there's a lot of communication and synergy to be built up with these players, and it's going to take some time. So I think the Florida Mayhem could start off bad and then perhaps develop as the season goes on. And if it depends how long it depends how long they take to develop. If they only take a stage to develop, they'll be fine. If it takes them 2 stages, you're talking you're halfway through the season and you're outside the playoffs. Now you've got to grind. You've got to be really good in the second half of the season, because otherwise you've got no hope. So the Florida Mayhem go into the next season of the Overwatch League, and they've got to go and play the Atlanta Reign and then the Philadelphia Fusion. Philadelphia Fusion, your runners-up from last year. Atlanta Reign, a bit of a dark horse in my opinion. I think they could do pretty well. So that is by no means an easy start to the Florida Mayhem season. But Florida Mayhem, if they win those 2 games, they're looking good. Because that is a statement that their roster is going to work. Now, where do I think Florida might end up? I can't answer that question. I literally can't answer that question. The only thing I can think of right now is mid-table. I have to undoubtedly say that this is an improvement on the Florida Mayhem we saw last season, but I don't think it's good enough to be a challenger. simply because it's going to take time to merge, it's going to take time to develop, and I'm not sure that these players, player for player, are better than some of the other teams coming into the league, and some of the teams already in the league, and some of the improvements made by teams that have already come into the league. Honestly, I think the Dallas Fuel roster that we looked at last week is better than this roster, even though this roster is mostly Korean. I know that's a controversial thing to say, but it's where I'm going with this. Again, and I say this every time, we are here to be proven wrong. Power rankings last season were completely and utterly wrong. Everyone pretty much had the Seoul Dynasty winning it, if not London. It turns out at the end of our rankings we had New York Excelsior at the top. So, you don't know. And I'm not sure whether I agree with the power rankings that have come out this year either. That's for a later video. But this team is definitely an improvement on the Florida we saw last year, but I don't think it's good enough. That's what I'm going to say. It's not against you, Florida, or anything. Don't get me wrong. It's just I'm giving my own personal opinion on these teams. My opinion counts for nothing at the end of it, to be quite honest with you. But I definitely think it's an improvement. But remember, the league is going to be a lot more competitive this year and a lot more difficult. Especially when I get to the likes of Vancouver. Vancouver will be one to watch. But that is right at the end of this lot. So, enough. I've got a lot of talking to do about Vancouver. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.